Welcome to Beyond the Headlines. I'm Roy Kaunds, and as usual with me in the studio is my co-host Sunil, who is looking like a South American drug lord today with his new mustache.
Oh my goodness. Anyway, happy birthday, Roy.
Oh, thank you so much. Or I'll be a little more condescending. He actually looks like a Hindi film producer.
Who?
You look like Bonnie Kapoor.
Bonnie Kapoor. Okay, I'll have to Google who that is. Yeah, I'm just showing November.
End of November, okay.
Yeah, probably 2 or 3 days November thing. I might as well support Movember today.
Good on you. Okay, so Sunil, the big news of this week was the sitting of Parliament, 53rd Parliament.
Yes.
And all the Labour MPs were sworn in. And
all the MPs were 120.
Because I said Labour because it's actually all Labour.
2/3 majority.
2/3, yeah. So all the MPs were sworn in, and what was the highlight?
Well, I think the highlight was various MPs taking oath, and there was a lot of color there.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of diversity there. Some came in hats.
Yeah.
Some came in, the
traditional cloaks.
Cloaks, and I thought it was beautiful. It was what New Zealand is of the 21st century. I remember Helen Clark just posted a photo the other day, and they were like of Mike Moore's cabinet was swearing in, and she probably was the only female.
Right. Yeah.
And so, or probably one of the two, but it just shows so much diversity and people taking oath in Maori, in Te Reo, taking oath in English, some affirming their allegiance to the Queen, some taking oath
on the Bible,
on Bible or on the Holy Scripture, and and I think the various languages that were used. Was a great testimony for New Zealand.
And that actually kicked out the controversy because Gaurav Sharma, who is the first time Labour MP, and also incidentally the very first time a MP of Indian origin was elected to Parliament. All other MPs before him were on the list. He was elected by the electorate. He took his oath first in Maori and then in Sanskrit.
Ko aho ko Gaurav Sharma, ekiana irunga I te pono, I te tika, I te nākau tapatahi. Aham Gaurav Sharma, satyanishtataya, shuddha karnen, vastaviktya cha ghoshyami, nishchitam karomi cha yat, vidyanusaram mahamahim maharagya Elizabeth Dvitya.
And that actually created a bit of a storm in a teacup. So tell us about that. What happened in Twitter?
Well, I think on Twitter, one of the writers for Spin-Off, Michael
Field,
he questioned why Gaurav was taking oath in Sanskrit, and also he said that the Sanskrit is the language of oppression. Many Indians, I studied Sanskrit in school, the main characters, Tita and Sita, Ami, Ave, Ave. So it's a 9 square grid.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful language. Sanskrit is like French. It's very sweet, like Urdu, very sweet. And Sanskrit is the origin of so many things,
right.
From mathematics, Aryabhatta and all. And what Mike is trying to take the point, as I see it, he's talking about the language of oppressor as in the caste system, which is very different.
Yeah.
Gaurav could have taken oath in Hindi or Punjabi.
I think Gaurav actually made a good point. No, so the first, let me with Michael Field. If his objection was that why is a Kiwi taking an oath in a foreign language, I may have considered that. Okay, I said, okay, you have a viewpoint that you are basically an English-speaking nation, and when we come to the country, we are supposed to sit the IELT tests, and we need to be proficient in English. No one asks us how many languages we know. So, from that point of view, I would concede if he had said that why is someone taking an oath in Sanskrit? What got my goat, Sunil, was the fact that he is using Sanskrit, is politicizing, he's weaponizing Sanskrit and saying that it is the language of the oppressor, and he's actually targeted Modi, which is surprising because I think Michael Field is not a left-winger. I think, although I don't know what his political views are, but he is definitely attacking Labour. So what he did was he's trying to attack Labour, the Labour government, through Gaurav Sharma by saying that Gaurav Sharma is supporting Modi. Now, Modi has got nothing to do with Sanskrit. And that's what Gaurav Sharma actually, as we will see in this, in the visuals, Gaurav Sharma actually took the trouble of sending out a chart to, Michael Field and telling him that Sanskrit is the mother of all Indian languages. He says, suppose he had taken oath in Hindi, only 25% of Indians speak Hindi, or any other language, his Himachal language, for where he, hails from, a Pahari language, that hardly any people speak that. So he did the right thing by, so if a Maori, like, when Debbie Packer, and Ravi,
the Maori party candidate.
The candidate. I mean, the MPs. When they came, they brought their culture, which was great, because and they came in their traditional official costumes, and they took the oath in the Rio.
See, that begs the question.
Yeah.
So what is the culture of New Zealand?
Exactly.
So if we are saying Maori is a culture, right? And the Europeans are not willing to take on it.
Correct.
So what is the European culture?
Exactly. What is exactly?
And then what is the New Zealand culture?
Exactly.
So if New Zealand is a country of migrants, which it is, then migrants bring their culture. And we are, it's a great diverse nation. And I think through that, the swearing in, we could see diversity being celebrated.
And we are in modern times where we need that diversity, and we need that kind of cultural exchanges. What made America great was it was a melting pot of cultures. In the sense that the Spanish came.
The Spanish were there, Irish were there, English were there.
The Mexicans,
French were there,
Jews,
everyone,
and they retained the identity while building the nation. The Italians,
Yes.
they all retained. So, and I think that is the way to go forward. Now, with Michael Field trying to score some cheap points, by castigating Sanskrit, I thought it was in very, very poor taste. And as you would see from the comments, that many people actually,
But to be fair to Michael, he's talking. He goes on to elaborate that it is more about the caste system in Hindi, because Sanskrit would be spoken by the Pandits and the Brahmins, etc. And, he's trying to take that point, and he says on his visits to India, he's been to areas where language is dividing people. And, Sanskrit is such a language that, nowadays only a select few would speak. But I think it is something that we need to welcome. As Gaurav rightly says, he could have taken it in Hindi, but then in Punjabi or Pahari.
It wouldn't have been representative.
And Sanskrit is the mother of all those languages. And it's a great testimony to New Zealand that we are a diverse nation. We accept different cultures. We accept different languages. Okay, not many people would have understood the Sanskrit oath or religions that he was saying, but it's just showcasing that he's also respecting his grassroots from where he's come, and also acknowledging where he is won from, which about 25% of his electorate is Maori.
And 70% Pakya.
So he's representing those people, and if these people didn't want him to be representing them, they would have voted accordingly.
Now, there are people who did support Michael Field, and including Indians, many Indians, saying that, once you come here, we need to leave everything behind and, meld in with the new culture, which, by the way, is not Labour's official policy. Labour does not want that,
But
kind of
they've also got a good point, but I think the point is not valid in this discussion.
Exactly, And the other point which Gaurav made was that he himself learned Sanskrit in a very small rural school where there were, people of all dispensations there, and they all learned. And okay, now let me tell you something else. there are so many universities, and I'll show you to you on the visuals. There are so many universities and there are so many schools now in Europe, in London, in Germany, who actually encourage children to learn Sanskrit.
Witty, no. Yena by way.
Jamal, it's up to you again.
Na, one, two.
No? All right, this is going on the bonus.
Samshrutirjnana yoga vastiti danam damascha yajnashcha.
Before I go to sleep, I sing Sanskrit. Buddhosi buddhosi niranjanosi samsaramaya parivarjitosi samsara swapnam tyaja mohanitram madala solla panuvacha putram.
And the reason they encourage children to learn Sanskrit is because it helps them to develop mathematical, as you said, that nine grid.
The matrix.
I mean, everyone knows that Sanskrit is it's a Devanagari, which means the language of the gods, they call it, because it is perfect. You can write a computer language in Sanskrit because there are only laws, there are no exceptions, and it's a brilliant, beautiful language to express yourself. And the fact is that it is not a dead language because there are villages in India which only talk in Sanskrit, and these villages are not Brahmin villages. So basically, I think what
language doesn't have a race, religion,
exactly
creed, gender.
Okay, now let me give you an example. Now a lot of liturgy in the Roman Catholic Church is done in Latin. Of course, now things have changed, but most of when the Pope does the Mass, he does it in Latin. Now, does it mean that Latin is, someone speaking Latin is trying to, promote Roman Catholicism? It's nothing to do with Roman Catholicism, Just like Sanskrit has got nothing to do with any Hindutva ideology.
No.
So this Michael Fields and people of his ilk, while he may be making, a valid point in the sense that, if someone comes to New Zealand, they should, take up the New Zealand culture, but which you very rightly said that, tell me what is that culture, But the way he put it, saying that it is a tool of oppression, it is for Hindutva, and he mentioned Modi 2 or 3 times. So it's very clear that he is an anti-Modi person, and he's trying to just get some brownie points, again using Indians as a football.
Yeah, I think there may be a little bit of naivety, or maybe Michael didn't explain himself well. Yeah. And I do get his point, what he's trying to say about Sanskrit and probably taking an aim at Brahmins, the caste system, not Brahmins, but the caste system.
Yeah.
So, and I think we have moved on from the caste system. Yes, in some parts of India it's still prevalent, but, show me which country doesn't have problems,
Right.
For example, hopefully we'll discuss, but, your gun laws, you go and take all the guns, but you still have gun problems.
Exactly.
So, problem will always be there in any country, but I don't think Sanskrit is a root problem of Hindutva ideology or
Modi's is not
Modi's,
a tool being used by him. So it's ridiculous to say that Modi is using Sanskrit as a tool.
No, but I think it's great that people are able to express themselves. The parliamentarians or the members of parliament taking oath allegiance can do it in the languages that they choose. I mean, Mahesh Mandra took an affirmation in Tereo and on
the Gita. Yeah.
So we have different options, and it's great that the parliament doesn't restrict it.
Yeah.
They give, it's a freedom of choice.
Exactly.
So they give the members a choice. How would you like to do it? And it's a way of expressing that, I affirm, and I'm also paying respect to my forefathers or place where I come from.
I would have been happier if Michael Fields had actually spoken about, republicanism and, the affirmation to the Queen. Let us start a debate on that. In 2020, I mean, do we still need to be under the Queen? one of the Caribbean governments recently went republic. I forgot whether it is Jamaica or one of those Caribbean countries. They said that we are no longer a constitutional monarchy.
Yeah.
And it is high time that in Australia this debate has been raging for a long time. So has it in New Zealand. But it's high time that we actually have those debates. It's a rubbish debate. Whether you should do it in Sanskrit or not. And also let me tell you, in the Indian Parliament, how many languages they use? Because there are people from the south who can't speak Hindi at all. So they may give, because translation services are there and they translate, So there are so many languages in which debates and question time and 0 hour is done in English, in Hindi, in Tamil, so many languages. So I think it's something like, countries like New Zealand should learn from, more robust democracies like India. Because, just with 5 million people and with 120 seats, I don't think Michael Field or anyone should feel that they are the epitome of democracy. If you want democracy, come and learn from India, but don't run us down by using language as a tool. Yes. Don't weaponize language. Languages are beautiful. All languages. Stereo is beautiful. And we support that. The Indian community in New Zealand supports.
Yes.
We have supported the Matariki holiday.
Correct.
We have supported the use of Stereo. So many, do you know how many Indians are learning Stereo? I think the more Indians are learning Stereo than the Pakia.
Yeah.
My daughter came first in her class, in Stereo.
I couldn't get admission, so hopefully next year they'll admit me in Tewanga or Tero to learn the level 3.
Right. In fact, in my former employment, when the employer said that does anyone want to learn Stereo, most of the candidates were Chinese and Indians.
Because it's beautiful language.
Yeah. Because we understand, we understand diversity. We understand, we have no hatred.
No.
But things like which Michael did, although I agree with your point that the point he was trying to make, I somehow concede that point.
Yeah.
Saying that if you are in New Zealand, what is the need of different languages? It's a parochial, narrow viewpoint, but I can understand his viewpoint. But don't weaponize. And that's my humble plea to people like Michael.
Yeah.
Well, that's one topic, our segment done, Sunil. The other issue I wanted to speak to you about was about Grant Robertson's writing a letter to Adrian Orr, the Reserve Bank governor, and asking him in a very roundabout way to do some policy to bring down house prices. What is your take on that?
Wow, he wrote, Adrian acknowledged it.
Yeah.
And he gave the answer, and I think it may be. I just hope it's not, okay? I hope I'm wrong. But I just hope it's not another way of another tax. Because if you got to, because the current stress thing is if you sell anything till 5 years, then you are taxed on it.
Yeah.
If you sell anything after 5 years, you won't be taxed on it. But hopefully that tax doesn't become another tax, which means, rather than 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a double the tax kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So it's I think as Reserve Bank Adrian Orr rightly said that they take the house prices into consideration when they're doing the monetary policy.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the reasons, if you see during COVID, what has happened is that the LVR restrictions were taken off.
Yeah.
And that was a way of stimulating the economy.
Right.
So once that was done, those who had 70% LVR could go up to 80% for investment, and that 10% was pumped into the market.
You actually, I think what you left unsaid, but which I could read between the lines, is that what you're saying is that it was, more of a political move by Grant Robertson to write a letter to Adrian Orr. The reason being that, as some of our viewers would know, that the Reserve Bank really is very agnostic in terms of, house prices or, they only are offering, they only look after two things. One is that monetary policy.
Yeah.
They need to ensure that there is enough money available in the market and it is available at the right price.
Correct.
So when, things are tight, they will, loosen the interest rate, make it cheap. And when, a lot of people have started borrowing, they will increase the interest rate so that less people borrow. So basically, that is the job of the Reserve Bank. They are agnostic in terms of whether my policy is affecting housing, whether my policy is affecting, credit cards, or they don't bother about it, because they only have to see that their policy has got enough money in the market and that employment is at a good level and inflation is not running away. That's all that the Adrian Orr has to do.
Correct.
Now, the policies that he has done by reducing the OCR and reducing lending levels and all of that is actually all good in terms of the economy. Because of the hit that we got from COVID, we need more people to take loans. We need more people to spend money. We need more people to feel good about. So suppose I buy a house, I feel wealthy, so I start spending more money, which is what Adrian Orr wants. He is not really bothered whether the prices go up or not. That is a politician's job.
Yeah, RBNZ is independent then of
And
and
government. It should be, yeah.
And I don't think, the government should influence any policies of the Reserve Bank, because then it becomes, government needs to take actions themselves rather than telling the Reserve Bank
Absolutely.
and interfering in how they do their...
You can't have a Reserve Bank which is controlled by the government, because if that happens...
My gripe with Labour is that before they came last time, in 2017, they were saying house prices.
Correct.
They banned the foreign investors, etc. They couldn't control the market then. The market has gone, in Auckland, what are they saying, 10 to 20% up?
20%, yeah.
If they can't control that, so they haven't delivered on what they said.
Exactly.
So the Kiwi build was a fail. First home buyers are still left out of the market. So that means if you are first home buyers, an average $1 million house in Auckland, you need $200,000.
Right.
Either some of the ways to stimulate that is maybe the government backs the 20% deposit. And has some sort of an option of rent to buy or
something like that.
And maybe in 3 or 4 years the equity goes up, they repay it.
There are 3 or 4 points that I want to make here. The first point was that a government a Reserve Bank should always be independent of the government. If the Reserve Bank is not independent of the government, then the government can use it like their own personal bank. And whenever they want money, they want to increase benefits, they want to throw money to buy votes, they will just create the money and they'll just throw it in the economy, which is the reason why countries like Venezuela and the former Soviet Union and all these communist countries, they collapse. Zimbabwe, they all collapse because that is what the government does. The government uses the Reserve Bank as their own property, which is the reason why, in the 1930s, America decided to divorce the Federal Reserve from the government. So the Federal Reserve is a law unto its own. You cannot have the Federal Reserve being controlled by the government. So that is the first point. All socialists, and especially parties like Labour, have it in the back of their mind or in their heart, and I may be stretching my neck out to say this, that they need that control. And Grant Robertson's writing a letter, although it is not very serious, but for me it smacks of that kind of socialist policy, where you want to have your say, in what the Reserve Bank is doing, which he shouldn't. Grant Robertson should only make his political policies.
Correct.
His fiscal policies. Don't interfere in what Adrian Orr is doing. So that's one point, that I wanted to make.
I think Reserve Bank should be independent. Otherwise, it'll happen like what Raghurathan and all have happened in India. It needs to be independent. They're not silly people.
No,
they're one of the brightest people in New Zealand that are running that. Adrian Orr has a responsibility to do that. But you can't blame Adrian Orr or the Reserve Bank for lowering the interest rate and stimulating the market in a COVID time. Otherwise, what would you do if the interest rate is at like 10%? Will go belly up.
Absolutely.
Is it better to go belly up, or is it better to have some sort of a stimulus in the market? And if the government is not capable of controlling the housing market, which they said they would, so they have failed just like the national has failed.
Exactly.
So there's no true difference. The national let foreign investors come, so foreign money come in. Labour stopped it, but it has gone to prove that it hasn't helped the cause.
The investors were not the reason for the...
Exactly.
See, the fact is, Sunil, anywhere in the world where a country is developing and growing. Now in India, many, many years ago, when we were like a semi-socialist state, there were hardly any houses being built, and the house prices were, abysmal, very cheap. because there was nothing to buy. Now, with the huge construction boom in, like in Noida and in Gurgaon and in, Tamil Nadu and Gujarat, and everywhere in India you find this, multi-story building. Look at the in Bombay, in Mumbai, where I come from. It is well now impossible to buy a house, for a salaried person. You'll have to probably go out to the suburbs and then work your way, And this is what everyone does, when people come here, people first buy somewhere in, suburbs, and then they probably make some money and they buy, closer to the city. So house prices, say in Tokyo, in New York, are unaffordable. I remember in 1997 when I went to Hong Kong, and I just happened to ask my, the person who was with me, I asked him, what is the average house price in Hong Kong? And he said some figure, and I calculated it, and I was gobsmacked, That's the kind of money which we wouldn't make in two lives,
Yeah.
But that was the cost in 1997 in Hong Kong. And we just need to understand that in the end, see, socialists want everyone to have a house, which is a wonderful, thing. But how can we achieve that? Because if you're going to work on capitalist lines, there will be the people who work hard and who have the, the equity, they will unfortunately end up buying the house. You can't legislate.
See, the problem is if you start putting caps
Yeah.
on LVRs and other things, then it hurts the developers.
Exactly.
And if it hurts the developers, because see, most of the development is done to second-tier lending because banks won't lend them.
That's right.
So if it's done to second-tier lending, which means it's higher interest rate,
Right.
so they have to pay it back.
Yeah.
You can get it for 2.5, but if they are charging you 10%,
Yeah.
they are going to then on-sell that cost.
Right.
Yeah, so what you can buy for $500,000, they'll probably sell it for for 700,000. So house prices won't come down.
Correct. And another point I want to make, Sunil, is let's say there's a $2 million house, and the $2 million house is now, being sold for $2.5 million, $500,000 more. But really speaking, the people on the lower end, and I'm talking like a centrist or a right wing, because the labor people will not like me talking like this. But if you are on the lower end of the ladder, where you don't have the means to buy the house, you're not really affected by those prices. What government should do, is provide cheap housing to the vulnerable sections of society, which is not happening.
See, well,
You can't expect a person on a benefit to buy a $2 million house.
so my thing is, we already had this kind of operating model,
Yeah.
right?
Before the 80s.
Before the 80s.
Yeah.
So why can't, if that was successful, why can't we make it successful now?
And that is the reason why home ownership in New Zealand was so high. Anyone before 1969, when we changed from the pound to the dollar, at those days, before 69, all you had to do was collect 25 pounds, which in today's figure would be about 1,500 or 2,000, maybe whatever the affordable amount. It was about maybe 1 month's salary. You collect that money, go and give it to the government. The government builds the house. The government lets you stay in the house on a rent to buy thing.
Yeah.
You pay it for the lifetime of the loan, which is generally about 25, 30 years, and you pay 3% interest for the life of the loan, regardless of where the rates may go. Rates may go to 10, you're still paying 3%.
Correct.
The government guaranteed that, which is the reason why New Zealanders are proud house owners.
Yeah.
Why did they dismantle that? I have no idea.
Correct.
And now they are attacking the people who are buying that $500,000 or $1.5 million homes. They are being attacked. I mean, someone who is on a minimum wage has really, cannot aspire to buy a $1.5 million house.
No. Yeah. I mean, the repayment would be so high, so you don't qualify.
Exactly, yeah. So government should, and then it comes to the thing of housing stock. I mean, most of the stock that we have is so poor. I think the previous national government probably did the right thing by selling off some of the, state houses, which were like white elephants, sitting on half an acre with two people. Housing New Zealand tenants living in a house where it could have accommodated 30 people. And I think National did the right thing. You sell it off and then build high density housing in places which, and we're not saying that build houses in the back of the beyond. But right in the middle of it, we're seeing in West Auckland itself, how many high density houses are coming in prime areas.
Yeah.
And that's the way to go forward.
The houses near the transportation
Transportation,
hub,
yeah.
because that's easier. So it gives an incentive to the people to work also.
Work
because
and
transportation is not an issue.
Correct. You don't need a car. You don't need and then subsidize transport for these people.
Yeah.
So if you're on a minimum wage, do some.
It's like gold card.
Yeah.
You know,
Give them something like that where they can use transport. They don't have to come and buy a lemon. And most of the second-hand cars which this vulnerable section of society use, they're lemons. What has the government done to stop this kind of imports?
Correct. Yeah.
Nothing. So it's really bad. So coming back to what Grant Robertson did, I think it was a political move, and really the government should not interfere with the.
Correct.
That's our viewpoint.
Yes.
Yeah. I do not know if you guys agree with it, but if you agree with it, do write in and let us know if you agree with our opinion. Like last few minutes, Sunil, I just wanted to very quickly touch on the spate of gun violence that is happening in South Auckland. Earlier this year, RNZ had an article which said that this was the highest gun violence in a decade. And then we had that cop, the poor guy Matthew, who was shot in our backyard. And then a few other police officers who were shot.
There was just yesterday
in Christchurch.
Up in Katai also.
Yeah, also in Christchurch, there was a fellow got off the car and started assaulting the officer, and broke his finger and all that. Why is this happening?
Well, I'd just like to know what happened to the gun buyback scheme. So basically, all the innocent people sold their guns back.
Yeah.
But the gangs never sold it.
No, and because their guns are not licensed. Their guns come in.
No, there was amnesty, but it just goes to show that it was just a facade.
Which gangster will give up his gun, you tell me?
Exactly.
But you're forcing people with legal guns who are doing it for recreation or whatever, shooting practice. You're buying,
And the gun violence was not going to be sorted out through gun buyback scheme.
Yeah.
And the black market is still there because these guys are still acquiring it.
Yeah.
And it makes the life hard for the police.
Right.
It puts the public in danger.
Yeah.
This is what is happening in South Auckland. You can have lots of huis, you can have a lot of things. But until and unless you go back to the root problem and find out how these things are coming, nothing is going to happen.
I really think that like Australia and America and even India and China, the police here should be armed. Now, there is a strong resistance from certain sections of New Zealanders not to arm the police. Let us understand, we are not in the 1990s or even in the 1890s, okay? The world has changed. We have violent criminals out there with guns who will create mayhem. And the only way to counter them is you can't fight them with a butter knife or with a pepper spray. The problem with New Zealand is that if someone comes to attack me and I use a baseball bat to fend him off, then I will be, if he has got, I'll be in trouble because they said that he did not have a weapon. So I should say, wait, what are you having? Oh, do you have a butter knife? Wait, let me search for a butter knife. Then we'll fight with a butter knife. That's what, this is a kind of stupid, kind of mindset that some people have here.
I think the police should be armed.
Absolutely. And the police themselves, the frontline officers want that. But political
Well, why
pressure.
wouldn't you want it? Do you want to go unarmed into a dangerous gang situation?
Absolutely. And then
When you know for a fact that the gangs will have
unless you're Mark Mitchell, who can talk your way out of
that
Mark
guy's-
Mitchell's case.
yeah.
Yeah, he was a legend. He was surrounded by 30 gang members armed, and he talked himself out of that situation.
Yeah.
But not all police officers can do that.
No.
Mark is a legend. But you're so right. Who wants to go into a fight unarmed?
Yeah.
And also a kind of equipment that the police are wearing. Now they're saying that they are wearing about 3 or 4 or 5 kilos of armor, which is now causing backache and problems to the police. Now invest in Kevlar and all of this kind of new technologies. But please, my opinion is that the police should be armed because we are living in really dangerous times. We are not that God's own paradise, which we sort of, because ask any cop who has been slain, or ask any police officer who's on the street.
Yes. Everyone would want to be protected.
Right. So thank you so much, Sunil, for a very animated discussion. I really enjoyed the talk, and I hope our viewers have gleaned some information from what we spoke about. You may agree with some of our views. You may completely disagree with our views. That's fine. We want disagreement. We want you to not, because that's the way democracy works.
That's right.
We don't want everyone to agree with us because that becomes a communist state.
No, well, freedom of speech. Everyone's got a viewpoint.
Right.
Everyone's got their opinions.
Yeah.
We encourage you to post your opinions. It may be because it is your opinion, and everyone has to respect it because that's your viewpoint.
Right.
And I may have a different viewpoint, Roy may have a different viewpoint, you may have a different viewpoint.
Exactly.
But it encourages good, robust discussions on topics of interest. So we welcome your opinions.
And often when we go out and we meet people who see our shows, they start engaging with us on such topics, and that's a very good thing. We want that robust discussion, the disagreements. That's how we move forward. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again with another episode next Friday at 7:30 p.m.
Good night.